Book 2, A Journey to Real Freedom, Part 21. Scene 7. I soon woke up, and it was suddenly another day at the babysitter's, a place I didn't want to go to. Miss Maggie, the babysitter, was very regimented. She also watched other kids like me. For the most part, she stuck everyone in front of the TV set for most of the day, while she was usually in the kitchen talking with someone on the phone, or making herself something to eat. She was a huge person who walked really slowly because of her gross weight. She actually had a hard time getting through the doors of the house. All of us kids would giggle and laugh every time she would try to get through one of the doorways. She had to walk sideways and then slowly push her way through. It was an older house she owned, and the doors seemed to be made for little Orientals. Every time she came out of the kitchen, she almost always had a big sandwich in her hand. I can't even remember a time when she was without a piece of food of some kind. If we laughed too much about what she was doing, she would do something to punish us. She was like one of those Gestapo enforcers in some of those World War II movies. I tried to tell Mum about her, but Mum would sometimes laugh and say, "No one can eat that much and be that mean. Someday you will like her," she would say. My great burden was to try and tie my shoes, while sitting face first in some corner for most of the day. Then there was Katie, whom she would make lay face down on the floor with a pillow against her mouth and hands behind her back. It looked rather hard to do from where I was, but she would do it. There was also another boy that was about a year older than me, and we became friends. We would make up jokes about the babysitter. His name was Steve. He was a black kid the babysitter didn't like, but she liked the money. She was paid to watch him. His punishment was to clean something, like the floor, the bathroom, or anything that she could think of. I know I didn't forget to mention that her name was Maggie. We would call her Saggy Maggie, but not to her face. When she heard us, she would grab us by our ears and put us in our place. All three of us learned after a while to be very quiet when she was around, especially since we didn't want to be punished all of the time. Sometimes we just couldn't help it, like the day Saggy Maggie got stuck in the kitchen door. She actually got wedged in the doorway shortly after having a huge breakfast. Katie, Steve, and I would sometimes sneak over to the kitchen door and peek through to see what she was eating. On this particular day, she had made herself a stack of pancakes about a foot high, with a whole cube of butter on the top. Then she poured on the syrup, almost an entire bottle. We sat there watching and trying not to laugh too hard. She would take these huge mouthfuls, and while she was still chewing, she would stuff more into her mouth. Half the time, she would be gagging on what she was trying to get down. At times, she would grab her neck, which was really big, and then force what she was eating down her throat. Then she took one really big bite, which was so much for her that she started rocking back and forth in her chair until she fell backwards on the floor. When she hit the floor, all the food that was in her mouth came flying out all over her face, chest, and onto the floor. What a yucky sight it was! All three of us ran back to the other room by the TV set and laughed for the longest time. We turned the sound down on the TV so that we could hear what was going on in the kitchen. There was some banging and commotion taking place while we were listening. She had grabbed one of the doors of the bottom cabinets to try and help herself up, but she ripped it off its hinges because of her weight. Then there was another bang on the floor, where soon after she began to say strange and odd words that I had never heard before. All of us began to laugh so loudly, and that's when she heard us. She began to yell at us from the kitchen. "What's all that laughing about out there? You know I don't like to hear you kids laughing, because I know you are laughing at me," she yelled from behind the kitchen door in her usual roaring voice. Then the door suddenly swung open, and there she was, standing there looking at us with the remains of what she didn't wipe off of her face and dress. She didn't look happy at all. All three of us were trying to keep a straight face, but it was impossible. Then Saggy Maggie started coming through the door, in her own mind, that is. "I'm going to take care of all three of you, and your funny little ideas," she said, as she moved sideways to get through the doorway. As she moved through the doorway, she realized that it was going to be a tight squeeze. However, she was very determined to get through it and over to us. She pushed and shoved and tried to pull her huge belly in so that she could clear the doorway, but it just didn't work. She kept forcing her way a little further and further until she was at the point where she could go no further. Then she began to make strange growling noises as she looked at us, like a tiger in a cage. "Grrr! Grrr! Grrr!" she said, over and over again, as she wriggled around and around, trying to work her way towards to us. She was definitely stuck, as while she waved her arms, trying to grab something to help her get herself through the opening, but she couldn't. All of us laughed and laughed, while she became angrier and more upset with us. She kept saying that we better be quiet, or the worst was going to happen. But we were little kids, and of course we loved to laugh and see funny things happening. So this was great. On and on she went, with her moaning and groaning. But then, all of a sudden, she began to panic. Her face became rather white and pale, with exhaustion from attempting to get through the door. She stood there for a moment, with her hands at her side and her head leaning forward with her eyes closed. She knew she was really stuck. Little Katie said in a whisper to Steve and I, "Do you think she's dead?" Then we all laughed out loud and knew we would be in for it.